Thanks for joining us this morning. I'm Mark DeFrancia, and I am the founder of Creative Self-Mastery, and these are the other members of Creative Self-Mastery. We've got Mihir Patel, Jessica Ruger, and Stanley Fisher, who is posing as Mihir today because of technical difficulties. I started Creative Self-Mastery a few years ago, and about 2 years ago, we put together this collaborative. And our mission really is to just be the pace car for other people. And we're going to talk about what pace car means, but in a nutshell, our mission is to hold people at a higher vibration than conventional wisdom does, or that fear does. This is, by the way, a series of conversations. This is not just one conversation. This is a weekly series of conversations designed to exactly do that, to keep people at a higher vibration throughout this crisis, and hopefully to allow them to broadcast that higher vibration out around them. In other words, for them to become the pace car for their community, for their families, and for the people that they come in contact with. And so today we just really wanted to talk a little bit about what it means to be the pace car. And then we want to invite you into a conversation about where you are with this, what your aspirations are for, how you'd like to present yourself, who you'd like to be in the face of this crisis. And then have an ongoing dialogue from week to week. So I'm going to let everybody introduce themselves really quickly, and then we're just going to get started with the conversation. Mihir, why don't you start first?
All right. So my name is Mihir Patel. I am a coach under the tutelage of Mark DeFrancia. I've been becoming a coach. I am one at the moment, learning the Creative Self-Mastery method. I'm very excited to support you guys on a regular basis using these Facebook Lives. But that's me in a nutshell. I'll hand it over to Jess next.
Hey, I met Mark through Stanley actually about 3 years ago and started coaching with him, and then he invited me to join this collaboration, and it has served me very powerfully. So I'm doing my best to show up and serve all of you as powerfully as I can to become leaders in your own life and learn how to be the pace car.
I met Mark originally 6-7 years ago when him and Mike put on a barbecue or a hog roast at their house, because I'm a working voice actor. And we started talking, and it took 3 years, and I was going through a major life change, and I brought him in to be my life coach. And here it is 4 years later, and I'm now one of his coaches. It's been a real blessing.
Thanks, Stanley. It's been a blessing for me to have all of you in my life as well. I'm very proud of what we've managed to accomplish this far into our collaboration. And this project that we're doing right now, this series of conversations, is very much in line in keeping with who we are and what we do. But I'm excited because now you get to see who we are and what we do. We've been doing this quietly for a couple of years, working privately with groups. And we decided this year that we were going to throw ourselves out into the public and stop playing small and play on a larger scale. So I'd like to just jump into the conversation because we're already a few minutes behind. And I don't want to keep people too long today, and I do want everybody to have a chance to contribute as well. Look, what are we here for? There's a huge global crisis happening right now. We're all painfully aware of it. Those of you that are joining from England, I think, are probably acutely aware of what it's like, how serious this really is. If you go into the streets of London right now, you go into Piccadilly Circus, which is one of the busiest places I've ever been to in my entire life, and is consistently like that every single day. You go to Piccadilly Circus right now, and it's absolutely empty. There was a picture of it yesterday with not one person in it. That gives you an idea of how seriously people are taking this. A lot of people are making their decisions based on fear. And we've decided that, we want to give people an option to make decisions based on at least their truth and understanding where their truth comes from when they make those decisions, and then being brave enough to follow through on the decisions that they make. In a situation like this, in pretty much in every situation, control is an illusion. If we want to believe that we've got control in the situation, and a lot of us do, and a lot of us want to try to enforce control in the situation, we can't. We cannot enforce any control in this situation. The only thing we can control is who we're going to be in the face of this crisis. So today, we're going to get a little bit more clear on who we're going to be in the face of this crisis. So I'm going to ask everybody to think about what are their end results for being here. You all showed up here for something, and I'd like to know what that is. So what's your end result? What do you hope to achieve by being here today? And what do you hope to achieve by being part of these conversations going forward? I think I've been fairly clear. My end result is, give people an option to come at this virus from a higher vibration and to essentially lead the people around them into a higher vibration and keep them there, and to keep people out of their fear and their desperation and their panic. That's my overall end result. And my end result for today is really to get everybody here enrolled in my vision of doing that. So that's what I hope to achieve today. Jessica, what do you hope to achieve today?
What I hope to achieve is to give you guys an experience of understanding a process of recognizing your truth and exercising the choice of honoring your truth so that you can allow yourself to have the experience you want to be having despite whatever's going on around you. So we can't control the situation, but we can control how we respond to the situation. And I want y'all to have that experience so that you can use that going forward in your life throughout this epidemic, and as well as, in your personal relationships and so forth.
Excellent. Thanks, Jess. Stanley.
I really want to see the level of awareness rise in everyone who's joining us today, so they can see how their fear is hurting themselves, their families, their communities, and that there's a different option that they can choose to create that can bring stability, balance, love into the home, into themselves, and back into their communities to rise up out of this situation and to be of service to everyone.
Excellent. Mihir.
Really echoing what all of you guys have said, but to put you back in the driver's seat. I want anyone that listens to put them back in the driver's seat, to truly become the pace car, to step out from a place of fear and to gain some equilibrium again, because there's a lot of unknowns that are happening right now. We're in a situation that we've never been in. Some of us are fear-ridden, some of us are in denial, and it's basically striking a balance between those two sort of poles. And coming from that place and raising the vibration around your love and your service, how to really be the beacon of hope with your family and your community. And that's really what I want people to kind of get from this and going forward.
Excellent. Thanks, Mihir. First thing I want to do is talk about our shadow. Our shadow is basically our fear, our pain, and what most people would think of as their current reality, because most people actually do live in their pain body, in their fear most of the time. And so I want to talk about, what's coming up from us. What are we afraid of? What are we afraid is going to happen externally, like on the global scale? And what are we afraid is going to happen in our own lives internally? How will it affect you? So the effect on the world and the effect that it has on you. And I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, because this conversation is, let me make this perfectly clear, is not a conversation about what we're afraid is going to happen. This is not a conversation where we're going to let our fears out and everybody, we're going to talk about them and marinate in them and, all feel miserable when we get out of here. That is not what this conversation is about. This conversation is about, yes, there is some fear and we have to address it, because the four of us, we don't work in denial. We work in the truth, and part of the truth is that you are afraid. We want to explore that, but only to a certain degree. Most people will have you explore it to the nth degree and sit and marinate in it, and that's not what we want. We want a quick dip in so that we understand, we're all clear on what is playing out for us, but then we're going to move into, to who we're going to be in the face of it. So I'm going to kick it off. For me, my concern for the planet is really that this virus will weaken the infrastructure of the planet, the global infrastructure. Banks are in jeopardy. Major businesses are in jeopardy right now. the travel industry, the entertainment industry, the hospitality industry being very hard hit right now. And I'm concerned that from a dysfunctional perspective, from my fear, I'm afraid that this is going to separate us, bring us further apart, that coalitions between governments will start to dissolve, and that basically the infrastructure of the planet will start to crumble. Now, that's a really large fear, and I'm not even sure how realistic that is, but that's what's on my mind. Internally, what am I worried about? You know, most of my family, my siblings are in their late 60s, early 70s, diabetes, health problems, heart problems. I'm concerned for them. I'm concerned that they will become collateral damage in this virus. I'm concerned for what that means for their children, their grandchildren, and their great-grandchildren. I'm concerned for what it means for my friends and family to go through similar losses. I'm concerned for my friends that are in the process of losing their businesses already. And I also have an extremely internal concern that I'll bring up a little bit later on. So yeah, I've got those fears. Now, am I different from anybody else? No, I've got them, but I am different because that's not where I'm going to put my focus going forward. I'm letting you see that because it's real, but there's also another very real side of what I'm experiencing, and that's where I choose to put my power. I mean, here, what's your shadow globally and internally? People, if you want to get involved in the conversation, start typing now. Let us know what your
the questions are coming in now.
Okay, good.
About it. I'll mention them in a second. My concerns, very fear-based stuff. You know, that the conspiracy theories around all this happening, all that is true. You know, the authorities, the governments are working against one. This is all a massive ploy. That, you know, having some actual weight in truth on a global scale, what it means for me as a business owner here. For opportunity, what will happen? Will I become collateral damage from an infrastructure and a circumstantial point of view? Family wise, my dad and my mom. My mom's like abroad, so I can't keep an eye on her. There's that. My dad, he's like, you know, approaching 70. You know, he's, you know, though he's healthy, he's a prime, you know, candidate for this virus. You know, for them to really, you know, affect him severely. And something, you know, a bit more, you know, closer to home, I guess it's just, you know, the fear that, you know, I'll get ill when I, you know, won't recover. Like, that's the extent of my fear. It goes that even though I'm a young man, I'm fairly, you know, healthy and all that kind of stuff. My fear goes to that extreme, you know, even though the odds and the information say, oh, nothing's going to happen to me. You know, I sometimes my fear gets the best of me. And that's really my you know, my main concern.
Yeah, good. Thanks, Mihir. Jess, what's your shadow around this virus?
My shadow is people going so deeply into their fear that they behave and react in panic. And similar to what you said, creating more disconnection and division between people. And personally, how it may affect my own home environment, my business. I already have 2 clients that are not currently employed, and I have concern for them and ways that I can continue to support them. And yeah, that's what's on top.
Brilliant. Thanks, Jess. Stanley.
You've already hit on a few of mine already. Business-wise, I've already lost, you know, thousands of dollars this month, so I always got fear on a global scale business-wise. But I think the biggest thing globally that I'm afraid of is what will this do to us and how we interact with one another across the world, because this is affecting us everywhere. On a personal note, I'm afraid that I won't be able to get home to my family because they are keeping people from wanting to travel per state. And how bad this could actually get, that would keep me from getting to them.
All right, fair enough. Thanks, Stan. Anybody have any fears? Anybody in the listening audience have anything that they want to convey?
I've got a few shadows here. If you want
Okay, great. Let's share the shadow.
All right. So, you know, Grazia, she mentions, you know, I'm afraid that my mom and brother might die. We've got Nicole. She says the global fear is a breakdown of relations. Personal fear is concern for my mom, who just isn't staying put like she should.
There's a lot of that.
Exactly. And then Brenton says, is that his shadow, he doesn't give a shit about anyone else. Me and my family are the only ones that matter to me. Where he sort of tribal sort of thing going on, a lot of tribalism in its extremity.
Okay. Okay, cool. So there it is, right? There's some selfishness, there's some anger, fear, all the levels of dysfunction are shown here. I'm sure there's some sadness too. I know personally, I know somebody whose parents are both in their 80s, they're both in poor health, and they both have it. She's not expecting her parents to survive. And I find that quite sad, even though I don't know these people. I just know their daughter. I find that quite sad. So the whole spectrum of dysfunctional emotions are represented here. But I think it's time to discuss, what being a pace car is, because that's what this is all about. And that's the first question that everybody asks is, what is being the pace car? Being the pace car really, by definition, is setting the example. But in this particular case, being the pace car is about deciding who you're going to be in the face of this virus, how you're going to conduct yourself in the face of this virus, this pandemic, and all of the fallout that precipitates out of it. Deciding who you're going to be, setting an end result, setting an intention for how you're going to conduct yourself that brings you up to a vibration that's higher than everybody around you. That's higher than the fear, higher than the sadness, higher than the panic, higher than the hype that everybody else is giving, that the media is launching, that Facebook is perpetuating, higher than the panic vibration. Something so high that when people are around you, they don't panic. When people are around you, they feel more comfortable. They feel more relaxed. They're not as despondent about what's happening. That's what I see as my mission and the mission of the three people in front of me and anybody listening, because if you came here, if you were called to this conversation, there's a good chance that you're here because that's who you want to be too. So the idea is that today we're going to try and get people to shift their focus to that higher vibration and actually think about who they intend to be in the face of all of this. And there's some ways that will help you get there. But being the pace car starts with understanding what your end result is. You can't hit a target unless you know where it is. And so you've got to know what your end result is. What are you trying to create in the face of this virus? What are you trying to accomplish? What's your end result? And your end result is really going to be based on your truth. And at the moment, if we stay in that negative vibration, if we stay in that dysfunctional vibration, then we will create our truth from fear. Now, there's all sorts of truth. And everybody has their truth. And trying to talk people out of their truth is next to impossible. You try and talk a Muslim into believing, that the Christian values are the right way and are the true and honest ways to communicate with God, and that's not going to happen. You can't talk people out of their truth, and their truth is subjective. It's based on all of the thoughts and feelings and agreements that they've made with themselves over the years, and how they see the world and how the world is, how they fit into it. And that's their truth. And a lot of people right now are living their truth. I had a conversation yesterday with somebody I thought would make a great addition to this conversation. But at the end, I had to say, I actually think you need to stay away from this conversation, because he was so in his pain body, so in his fear. And I was like, well, rise up. I expect that from you. You're the type of, you taught me that, and he didn't. He couldn't. He's just too afraid. He's too concerned. There's a perverse satisfaction in being cynical right now. And he was indulging in that. And that's totally okay. That's his prerogative. That's his truth. And that's where he is in it. And I didn't try and talk him out of it. But the people that are gathered here today, mostly, I assume, are here because they want to operate from a functional truth. Now, there's an opposite to everything. There's duality to everything. And so as much as there's subjective truth, there's objective truth, truth that's based on what we know to be fact, right? Or we call that reality. Now, the thing is, we'll never know the reality of the situation because we'll never know all of the truth, and we'll never know if the facts that we have are real facts or if they're only facts for now, or if something will disprove them later or whatever. So what I'm trying to get across to you is you can never actually really know what the truth is. There's a reality, and you can strive to know what the reality is, but you may never know that either. So you're going to have to decide what your truth is, and then you're going to have to live by it. What we would like to do today is get everybody deciding to draw their truth more from the functional aspects of things, more from the vibrations of objective truth or reality. And even if you can't separate your fear out, to at least acknowledge that your fear is reflected in your truth. So that's what being the pace car means to me. Guys, you want to build off of that or add your 2 cents in?
For me, being the
Jess?
pace car is, as you say, knowing what my truth is, being clear on my current reality, and taking ownership for my energy, my vibration, and getting clear on what my end result is. What do I want to experience as a result of this? And if I'm not clear on all of that, I have a real susceptibility to falling into someone else's reality and taking their truth on as my truth. And when that happens, I typically will go into fear and buy into someone's panic, and start to write my own stories from my own history around things that went wrong or didn't go the way that I wanted them to. So being the pace car for me is really getting centered and grounded in my truth, and then holding that space to invite other people into a more calmer position as an option, because there's a lot of different, stories going on. There's a lot of different truths going on. There's a lot of data being spread. There's a lot of panic. There's a lot of fear. There's a lot of greed. And so when I can center into what's true for me, my hope is that I can invite people into what's true for them from a place of calm and from a place of knowing that I'm going to be okay no matter what happens. I get to choose the experience I want to be having right now, and not fall into prey to my thoughts and feelings about it, but to get real clear on what I want to experience in this moment, while I'm doing the dishes, while I'm talking to you all, while I'm going about my day-to-day life, while I'm working with clients, to over and over again maintain that place of centered truth as far as I can see, and as dispassionately as I can see it, so that I can experience it more accurately.
Yeah, you bring up a really good point, right? Because you've all heard me say this before. The person with the biggest heart on for it wins, and what I mean by that is, we're either going to come down to the vibration of everybody else around us, or we're going to bring them up to ours. And it's very easy, as just pointed out, to succumb to the vibrations of fear and hysteria that are being perpetuated, and everybody is in that energy to a certain extent. So it's not difficult when you come across somebody who's really, really in that energy to start to buy into the hysteria. And that's just you coming down to their vibration, because they have the bigger heart on for passing on their voice of knowledge and getting you to come over to their way of thinking. Now, you can choose to hold steadfast in your vibration and insist that people come up to yours. In the conversation that I was talking about yesterday, I knew that the person I was talking to had no intentions of coming up to my vibration, at least not in the conversation that we were having at that time. And so I said, I'm not going to come down to his. He's not going to come up to mine. So that's fine. But I didn't waver. I said, come up to mine. He said no. And I said, okay, good. Then we don't need to talk. This is, if that's where you want to be, that's all the power to you. But you're not taking me out of mine, and I'll go spend my energy with people that want to come up to that vibration, or that would be relieved to come up to that vibration. because actually there are some people that really do want to get out of the panic and don't know how. So that's, so that's part of being the pace car is knowing that you're holding that vibration and actually having the biggest hard on for bringing people up to it instead of coming down to theirs. Mahir.
For me, really, it's being the first and last line of defense. The buck starting and stopping with you in any sort of collective or group or family or community that you're part of. Really leading by example. Asking yourself, if I am to be the best version I can be, what would be people be seeing, and actually acting upon that. Really being that beacon of hope and light amongst. There's a lot of shadow going on at the moment, and really stepping up. It's about, I think, Pace Car for me. It's not a title. I've learned all too well. It's not a title. It's a responsibility that you have to yourself and those around you to really just step up. From a place of fear and lack and panic and doubt, and really step to a place of power, knowingness. To not in like certainty in the normal sense of the word, but in knowingness that you got this kind of thing, and you're going to do the best you absolutely can. Yep,
brilliant. I'm gonna use the C word now. Consciousness, I was like, which one? Being a pace car is about being conscious. And I always tell these guys and all of our club, we always tell our clients, we're really on a quest to raise the consciousness of the planet. And as we raise our own consciousness and we raise our vibration, it becomes more of a responsibility. We're more powerful. The more conscious we are, the more powerful we are. But also, it comes with a great sense of responsibility. And Mahir was, kind of pointing out that he's constantly working, to maintain that vibration. It's a responsibility for him that he's aware of, and he assumes that responsibility willingly and understands that, he is going to come up against people who have a raging hard on for being angry and scared and hysterical, and that it's his responsibility to try and shed some light there if he can, and to try and bring them just out of their fear and into something more conscious and more functional. And that's a huge responsibility. And it doesn't just stop with this. Once you work on being conscious, and you start to raise that vibration, it becomes your ongoing permanent responsibility to spread consciousness. Mahir, you said there's some questions, yeah?
Yes, there are. Just a few more on the shadow stuff. So, Brendan kind of expanding, he goes, that's a shadow, he wants to learn how to balance his truth and his shadow. What are suggestions? Adeline says, she's oscillating between anger and powerlessness in front of how people are behaving selfishly out there, individuals and governments, but also faith that the world is waking up and may start looking at what's important in life, being all connected, saving the planet, and stepping up to help each other. How do we come from that place, from the place of doubt and fear to that, getting to that higher place? Denise says her only fear is that people don't follow the strict instructions that will get people sick and put more pressure on the NHS. Under pressure, people in need can't be helped in time. Those are her concerns.
All right, look, we're gonna go into that a little bit more. I'm glad that people are starting to contribute, because that's exactly what we're gonna start to look at next. I want Stanley to have a chance to kind of give his thoughts on being a pace car. But there was something in what Adeline said, which is that, again, there's duality to everything. And this is exactly what I mean when I say you have to decide who you're going to be in the face of this disaster. There's a school of thought, and it's legitimate. It's a fear, and it's a legitimate fear that the world could go tits up, But there's also the duality to that this could bring everybody closer together, that this could force the type of global community that we've been unable to achieve because we've been too selfish. And now that we don't have the luxury of being selfish anymore, that we may actually have to band together the way we should have all along. There's another way to look at this. We don't have to be doom and gloom. We don't have to believe that this is the end. We can believe it's the beginning, and we can work to perpetuate that as our truth. And so Adeline brings up a great point. Stanley, a little bit more, anything you want to add to being a pace car before we move on?
You pretty much hit everything on the head. It's just the only thing that when I do this work and I look at being a pace car, I see like my love for NASCAR, and I see that car in a herd following it. And that flips me to my next step is like, well, if I'm the pace car, then who's the herd? That's my tribe. That's my family. When I think of family, I think of like somebody who's sitting at home and they're being highly dysfunctional. What are they teaching their family in the face of adversity in this whole situation? You know, what are you passing down to your kids when it comes to, you know, being a representation of stability when you're sipping back wine, smoking cigarettes and freaking out, you know, on the phone and telling that while your child's sitting there and needs you. You know, I think of that and I'm like, you can be a completely different person and provide something that's much more quality in the face of this, so that the next generation is more functional.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, if we're talking about elevating the consciousness of the planet, then how we behave now is going to determine how we behave in the future. So that's why it's so important to be having meetings like this, conversations like this, where we're enrolling people in coming to a higher vibration, because yeah, we start teaching that, the next generation is going to know it innately because that's how collective consciousness works. And so, you know, we're working to overcome years and years, decades, centuries of unconscious behavior. And we're finally getting to the point where we're starting to understand the difference. And we're finally starting to understand that it starts with what we teach our kids. So, you know, if we can do anything as a group, you know, the four of us or anybody listening can do anything to have an impact on some of the parents out there that are inclined to run with their fear, and we can give them some insight that brings them up to a higher vibration and they can pass that vibration on to their kids, we've succeeded in doing something useful. You know, we're not perpetuating shit on Facebook. You want the world to change? Do not put a meme on Facebook and think you've done something to change the fucking world. You know, you haven't. You want the world to change, you're going to have to go out there and actually perform. You know, you're going to have to go out there and perpetuate a vibration. All right, I want to talk about what each of us, the coaches, are experiencing, and invite you to think of what you're experiencing in your own personal life and, you know, who you're going to be in the face of that. So there's a couple things that I'm facing. One of which I explained, I've got some fear around my family and stuff. One of the things that I really have to decide now, how I'm going to handle it, who I'm going to be in the face of it, is I've had asthma my whole life. So, and before I quit smoking, which was 14 years ago, I would have bronchitis 3 or 4 times a year, and sometimes pneumonia at least once or twice a year. Couple that with the fact that about 1.5 years ago, I had a heart attack, and I am extremely high risk. My husband is HIV positive, non-detectable, so theoretically he has a powerful immune system, and yet both of us are encouraged to get a flu shot every year because we don't want to get the flu. It's dangerous for us to get the flu. Okay, I live on a mountain, you know, far away from everybody. My fear isn't that there won't be food or anything like that. I have plenty of food, but I have all of that not because I'm afraid of scarcity. I'm afraid that there will be a scarcity. I have it because I don't actually want to go out into the real world. I don't have to, and therefore I don't want to at this point. I work from home. I work virtually, so I'm happy to stay isolated. I've been in self-isolation for 5 years. I'm quite comfortable with it. But self-isolation only works if you don't let anybody through the door. And our 2 best friends live next door to us, and you know, we moved them in a couple of years ago. We see them every week. Every Sunday for family dinner. They are our family as far as we are concerned. And we see them every week for Sunday family dinner at least, but usually 3 or 4 times throughout the week. One of them may be listening. is 28 years old, and he's a blind optimist. He is full of life, full of vigor, full of enthusiasm, and full of the hubris of youth because he thinks he's invincible, you know? And I'm like, hey, how are you going to handle yourself in the face of this? And he said, well, I'm not going to go to concerts and I'm not going to go to weddings and things like that. But my friends live in Charlotte. I'm going to go visit my friends, and I'm not going to I'm not going to let this pandemic get in the way. And I'm thinking, okay, well, my truth is that I'm susceptible, whether I am or not. My truth is that I'm high risk. Whether that's the reality of the situation or not, it's my truth. And I can only work from my truth. And is it somewhat based in fear? Yes, but it's also somewhat based in reality. So I can only go with what is true for me, what I feel is right and true for me. And I said to him, that may mean that we can't do Sunday family dinner anymore, you know, and that we have to limit our exposure to each other. Because the reality is, if he's a blind optimist, it's right in the words, the clues are in the name. He's blind. He can't, by his own admission, he can't see the danger that's right in front of him. Plus he's young, so he's got that working against him too. He doesn't feel like he's as at risk as everybody else, and he's probably not. So his truth is different than mine, but his truth conflicts with mine. And now I have to decide who I'm going to be in the face of that. Do I tell these people that they can't, my family, that they can't come over anymore? Do I say, okay, well, let's wait until we see, you know, how it affects our area? But the point is, by the time it's affecting your area, it's too late. So the isolation has to start now. Who am I going to be in the face of this? You know, am I going to let my fear get the better of me? Am I going to act in favor of my truth? And am I going to ignore what I know to be true about the other person? Because that's the whole point of this, is that you have to decide who you're going to be. And part of that is whether or not you're going to allow somebody else's dysfunction to get in your way. And if somebody insists on being dysfunctional, if somebody insists that they're not in danger and insists that, you know, they're going to handle this differently, that's great for them. That's his truth. I encourage him to follow his truth. But he's going to have to respect mine and understand that that may mean that I'm going to have to say, you can't come over until this thing passes. And that could be months, you know. That's my conundrum right now. Who am I going to be in the face of this? Now, I'll tell you, you know, afterward how I'm going to handle it. But there is a functional way, I think, that we can handle it. And so, but I'd like everybody else to kind of give some ideas, and the audience too, if there's anybody listening that wants to share, you know, what they're experiencing right now, their very personal experience with this, not what they're experiencing, you know, externally, but what, you know, something specific, like having a parent who's sick or something like that. Jess, did you want to chime in on this?
Sure. You know, in my own household, I have my daughter who's 23, my son who is 7, and my husband. And you know, Caius's school, it became obvious to me, my truth was starting last week, like, I just don't want to send Caius to school. And so I kept him home a few days, and then got a message from the school that they were going to cease to do schooling at the school and start to go to distance learning, which really aligned with my truth. So I was really grateful for that. My daughter works at an urgent care center. So she has been, up until yesterday, exposed to anyone who's coming in. And yesterday they started having people outside. So anyone who was presenting any symptoms didn't even come into the building, which I was grateful for that. My husband has been limiting his exposure and still going on with his business. He also went into fear around my daughter's exposure. And so, we had a lot of discussions around, I had to decide who I was going to be in the face of it. And, he was suggesting that maybe she not stay here while she was working there and what that might bring into our household. And as her mother, I was very tempted to go into reaction, and likely did go into some reaction, but not nearly as much as I would have in the past. But really wanted to, express my truth, which was I want her here. I want her to stay in this house. And we've talked about different ways that we can decide who we're all going to be in the face of it, and we came up with some ideas for ways that Chandler can take care of herself and what to do when she comes home after she's been exposed to that, and how she can remove the clothing that she was wearing and things like that. And then just taking on who am I going to be in the face of balancing work and now homeschooling my son and being of service. And also it became obvious to me not to have my clients come to my house, people that live here locally. We love the idea of being able to meet in person, and at risk of disappointing them, I chose to meet with them virtually, and that's been going really well. We also canceled the trip to Costa Rica. So we're all dealing with different situations, and I am just continuing to decide, okay, who do I want to be in the face of this? And what is my truth? And being able to ask for what I want without, just going with somebody else's truth.
Excellent. Guys, anybody else want to chime in, or do we have anybody from the audience that wants to speak?
If there's no one from the audience, I got something.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Stanley. And
Go ahead, Stanley.
So for me, it's more work related because I live alone here in Baltimore, and most of my interactions are with coworkers. And we've had two instances this week where things fell through the roof. And one of them, the person emailed me and was overly apologetic and was owning like a victim posture around it. And I wrote back and I said, look, with what we're dealing with, there's no reason to be in a right or wrong situation right now. This stuff's going to happen. Let's just handle it and move on. We got bigger things to worry about. And with another one, I went out of my way to call the person because we've made a lot of adjustments with our work environment, not only working from home, but our company laid off a large amount of people a month and a half ago. And things were slipping through the cracks, and it was causing a loss of money. And instead of reacting and pointing fingers or thinking I don't have the capacity or I'm powerless to the situation, I picked up the phone and called the person and had like a 10-minute conversation and asked her if we could create something so that we had each other's back in those situations that slipped through the cracks. And she turned around and thanked me. She's like, out of everyone I talked to today, you're the only one that's been pleasant. And I was like, I want to be in service. So.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you, Stanley. I mean, you bring up a good point that, the four of us have, last year in 2019, we just took a pledge, the four of us vowed to live a year in service. And we spent the entire year in service to our families, to our clients, to anybody we came in contact with, not just the people in our orbit. Well, I guess not just the people in our inner circle, I guess is more like it. Anybody in our orbit. It was an amazing year, and I encouraged all of my clients to get in on it, and most of them did, and they had amazing years as well. Being of service is the reason that we're here today, and the reason we're asking you to be a pace car in your own life. We need people to be in service to the greater good. We need people to be in service to each other, and we need some conscious people to be the leaders of all of that. And that's what we're trying to enroll people in today. So Stanley, you bring up one of the most important points, which is that this is about being in service. This isn't a selfish endeavor to just get yourself righted and then, breeze through the rest of this pandemic. This is, get yourself right, get yourself, functional again, and then set the pace and have other people set the example and have people follow you, and serve them.
Yeah.
Literally actively choose to serve them. Don't just be around them and hope that they come up to your vibration, choose to serve them.
Yeah, because one of the things that could have happened, living in a place of assumption, those stories could have generated an argument or an implosion inside our work environment instead of living through a truth of fact that I want to be in service to you.
Right. Absolutely. Do we have anything from the listening audience?
Just a few more around. So Nicole goes, for her, it's recognizing that she cannot reason with people out of their panic, but she can try to use their panic to drive sustainable decisions instead of constant food runs, plant the garden. Bettina says, her concerns are along the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, from staying alive, her loved ones, through safety, through economic problems, not being able to travel anymore.
Stop.
Yeah.
Let me just hit that. She just said the magic word, so let me just hit that. Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Well done. Was that Bettina?
Bettina Meyer, yes, Betty. She's awesome.
Yeah, well done, Bettina. Amen. Here's what's happening, and what's about to happen even more. The base needs are not going to be met. Food, shelter, air. I mean, even being able to breathe for some people is not going to be able to be met. The base needs are not going to be able to be met. And when they're not, people fixate on them and they become obsessed with them. And therefore they cannot move past them. If you don't have a place to live, it's pretty much all you can think about. If you can't breathe, it's pretty much all you can think about. But what we're asking people to do is jump all the way to the top of the hierarchy of needs, into self-actualization, into service ultimately, which is, that is the highest, that's at the top of the rung. Self-actualization and choosing to serve other people, looking past what you have or what you need and choosing to serve in spite of what you're lacking. That's the top of the hierarchy. And that's exactly where we're asking you to be. So thanks, Bettina. It's spot on accurate. And yes, you're legit. Your concern is legitimate because a lot of people will be completely fixated on what they can't get and what needs aren't being met. And in addition to this, a lot of people are going to lose their orientation. Orientation, whether people understand this or not, is the most significant need a human being has. A lot of people will argue, oh no, the need to survive is more important. No, the need to be orientated, to know how things are and how the world is more important. For people, when people can't get orientated, they start to spiral out of control. And then they start grasping at anything they can to get control. And that just becomes a downward spiral to the point where if they can't get any sense of control or orientation, they will even contemplate suicide or commit suicide. So actually, orientation is a stronger need than even the need to survive. And people are going to be losing their orientation here. And so where are we going to try and get them orientated? In moving beyond their own needs and moving into the needs of others. If you've ever lived in the deep South, which I have, you know that there are people that have nothing. They barely have shelter over their heads, and yet they would give you the shirt off their back. If you needed it, they would give it to you. Not because they're operating from some intense need to be loved, but because they genuinely desire to serve you. If anybody read my post while I was in New Orleans, went back to where I used to live, and it reminded me all over again of what I love about that city, which is, they're just in service. The people there are in service to each other and to the greater community. So yeah, Bettina, thanks for all of that, because that's important. That's important for everybody to understand here. people are losing their orientation, we're going to try and we're going to recognize that. And as conscious people, we're going to try and shift them into a more positive orientation. But also, we're going to choose to serve even when it's difficult for us to serve, even when we're afraid that it's on our doorstep, or even when we can't do the things that we need to do and we feel like our businesses are crumbling, or we're going to lose our homes, or we're sick. We're still going to work to serve. Yeah, because that's what being the pace car is. Cool. Was there any more here?
There's not much. Brenton just updated. He says, he says his shadow definition sounds slightly different from us. The shadow message is what perpetuates his fear. The part that wants to hide, repress, deny, and project onto others. When he acknowledges his shadow, he can see that where his fears, stories, dysfunctions come from. He sees from his own case the action of being in service to his community in some way pierces that shadow and connects himself to its truth, which is that he cares deeply about humankind, to choose to see this event as the beginning of a new way of being.
Yeah. Brilliant, Brendan. That's exactly what we're saying. Yeah, we've all got our shadows, but you're choosing to rise above it, set a pace. So great. Okay, so next part of the conversation is who we're going to be in the face of it, right? Going back to what to my example with our friends, I really don't want to have to exile them from our house. And I really don't want to be operating from that much fear. But I also can't disregard the fact that one of them is being reckless. And if they're being reckless and they're not willing to acknowledge that, or they're saying, well, my truth is more important to me, then I'm going to have to acknowledge that my truth is important to me too, and say, well, I feel like you're being reckless, and therefore we're going to have to adjust the way we interact with each other. However, being a pace car isn't about not speaking your truth or amending your truth. I could just turn around and say, well, I don't want to offend them. They're our family. So I'm not going to bring this subject up, or I don't want to be that guy who lives in fear. So I'm going to deny what I know is the truth, which is that I'm in a high risk group. That's not conscious. That's not being a pace car. Being a pace car is saying, okay, I'm aware of all of this, and there must be a way that we can handle this. So we've agreed, the four of us, to sit down and have an honest conversation in which we don't take offense at the idea that somebody is calling us reckless or hysterical. In my case, I'm sure they're thinking there's a certain amount of hysteria there. That we don't get offended when people, point out that we might be in our shadow or that we might be in our dysfunction, and that we don't get offended when people speak their truth and say, well, but from whether I'm in my dysfunction or not, I don't feel comfortable having you in my home if you can't make some amendments to the way you're living your life. Actually, being a pace car and being a leader is about stepping into that discomfort and having those painful conversations and working to have them consciously from an end result of finding some place in a higher vibration that you can meet. Not just getting together, hashing out your fears, getting into an argument and deciding never to see each other again. That's not conflict resolution. A lot of people think that resolving conflict is about telling people what you're feeling, and then once you feel better that you've resolved your tension around it because you got it off your chest, that the conflict is resolved. It's not. The tension is resolved, but the conflict is still there. The conflict is how you're going to behave, not what's going on for you. So we're going to sit down and we're going to have an honest conversation. And I'm going to be in the end result that we're going to find a higher vibration that to rise to, that we can all agree on the way we're going to move going forward, that it's not going to be based entirely in fear, and that it will reflect what everybody's concerns are and what everybody's truth is, and that somehow, I don't know how, because I don't need to know how, because I believe that you set your intention, you work to create that, and it becomes obvious to you what needs to be done. Because if we're all working towards being in that vibration, from that vibration, something will precipitate out. I don't know what it is. In this energy, I have no idea what it is. But when I step into that conversation with them and I step into my end result with them, and I know that we are determined, that we are committed to getting this, to finding some sort of workable solution, that we will. And that may mean one of us having to compromise on our truth. It may mean one of us having to change our behavior a little bit without completely changing it. Who knows? I don't know. Maybe we'll have a conversation and say, you know what, who cares? I don't know. I don't need to know. All I need to know is that if I come in as a pace car and I set the vibration up here and I know what my end result is for the conversation, I'm going to get there. I'm going to get there even more easily if everybody else has joined me in that. But guess what? As a pace car, if you know what your end result is and everybody else doesn't know what their end result is, you stand a better chance of actually getting your end result. Because while they're dickering around in their fear and their hysteria, you've got a place where you're trying to get them to go. They don't know where they don't have a place to go. They just want to stay in their fear. You can get them out of there. You can bring them into a way of thinking that they haven't had before. You can give them a perspective they don't have. And so that's the thing. As the pace car, as the more conscious one, you get to see it from the 30,000 foot view, and you get to be able to help people rise up to that vibration with you. Help them to look down and go, oh, look at what we're doing. Look at how we're behaving. We're totally in our shit.
It raises the third eye perspective instead of being hit in the face with a bunch of tree limbs.
Absolutely.
You can see the path.
Absolutely. Anybody else want to, kind of give an example of how being the pace car has worked for them? I just got confirmation this morning. It was the strangest thing. A woman who I had worked with years ago reached out to me, and this morning, I had been in a workshop situation with this woman years ago. I didn't know her or any of the people in my group, and I was in charge of teaching them how to do a personal reading, an intuitive reading on somebody. And so I tuned into this woman and I did a reading on her. She was a total stranger to me, and I got something extremely personal and extremely uncomfortable that I had to relay to her. And I was the leader. I was the pace car. And I had just told them that they can't hold back on their truth, that no matter how uncomfortable it is to deliver their truth, they have to speak it and they have to tell what they get. They can't edit what they get. They have to tell it completely unedited, because you don't know what that person needs to hear and you might edit out something they need to hear. So I said to this total stranger in a group full of women, I get that you're very sick. I get that you've been sick for a long time. I get that it's changing, it's affecting your life terribly now. And then I bit the bullet and told her the truth. And I said, I get that you need a hysterectomy. I mean, I'm a guy talking to a total stranger and telling her she needs a hysterectomy in an intuitive reading. She wrote me this morning and thanked me. That happened like literally 7 years ago. She wrote me this morning and said, I just wanted you to know, you gave me a really scarily specific reading, and it helped me make a decision. I made my decision and I'm healthy and happy now. And I just wanted you to know that. Sometimes you just have to do what you have to do, whether it's comfortable or not. And I assure you that being a pace car right now is not going to be comfortable. Speaking my truth to my friends is not going to be comfortable, but I'm going to do it because I'm convinced that it will serve. Yeah. Anybody else want to contribute? Some stories about how they've stepped into being a pace car, or they've stepped into their leadership. Go ahead.
I'll go first, Stan. Is that all right, brother?
Of course.
Thank you, man. So I have an amazing bunch of friends, very supportive of what I do, but I am part of various WhatsApp chat groups amongst my peers. And it's a lot of forwarding messages, a lot of fake news, a lot of non sort of vetted information coming through the airways, and nothing kind of like, no one knows what the hell to do sometimes. And there's, you know, yesterday I got a video that showed there's a riot going on, and that person thought it was, you know, it was current time, but actually it was from a riot that happened 10 years ago in London. If some of you can remember the riots in London 10 years ago, I knew straight away that it was a video from back then, because it was summer, it was a humid August weather in London, and the number plates were old. Like, that's just me, because that's where my you know, awareness is at, because I'm looking out for what's bullshit and what is useful. But a lot of stuff that's probably coming into your inboxes, into your personal chat groups, or your, you know, chats that you have, a lot of that I found is it's fear mongering. I have a chat group with my family members, and I said, look, don't post this stuff, because it doesn't help anybody. It just perpetuates the fear, and we don't know the accuracy of it. Now, if it was usually any other time, I would have just not said anything. But now I'm just like, look, this is bullshit. Everyone's scared as it is, right? Why do you need to perpetuate this even more? If it inspires a little bit of bravery and courage and calmness, a little bit of equilibrium, by all means, like, you know, post it. We need more of that. But there's enough stuff coming through the airways that, you know, it's becoming very difficult to make decisions and choices on, when you're, you know, told by authorities that you're supposed to trust, whether it be the news, whether it be the government, you know, whoever it might be, to whether it's actually valid information. And I'm finding that, you know, for more than ever in support for me, I just got a message right now, you know, showing a video how messed up Italy might be. And I'm like, that might be the case, but what can we do about it here? Like, us being in London, knowing that piece of information, what is that going to change? What end result does it have? And the end result, it doesn't have one. It's just going to inspire more and more fear and panic. And really, you know, it's taking the focus away from what's really important. There's a common end result, especially people in England, there's a common end result that we can aim ourselves towards. And that the biggest real reality is that, you know, the NHS, the health services might be overwhelmed, right? And I go, we can be in our power, be in the pace car for those around us who are acting maybe recklessly, not self-isolating, not realizing that, look, there's a knock-on domino effect if we don't look after ourselves, because there's not just people getting ill from coronavirus, there's people getting ill from other things that need to be seen to, and all that kind of stuff. And in the spirit of that and being of service, you know, spreading that message that, look, you know, how can we look after or prioritize our well-being more than ever now, so that whoever does need the care, does need the help, does need the assistance, can be, you know, seen to, and all that kind of stuff. So that's kind of where I'm stepping up, you know, making sure my friends know, like, look, stop the bullshit, like, stop spreading this bullshit. We need to focus on actually helping each other out, you know, making sure that we're good for our families, and, you know, leading by example.
Excellent. Leading by example, exactly. Stanley.
I pretty much work with voice actors, and I've got a new client. I've been working with him for about a month and a half. And about a week and a half ago, when we had our session, he goes, I think it's interesting what you're telling me, because it's affecting everything in my life. And I said, well, what do you mean? And he said the family's trying to take care of a brother who has, I believe he has Down syndrome, and they're trying to take care of him. And the mom just recently paid a lot of money to have the carpet redone in the main living room. And I guess what they saw and when they put it together, it didn't quite match what she was expecting. She was already frustrated with where we are, you know, in the world today, that the carpet just sent her on total, she lost her shit, you know. And he actually came in and showed her, he's like, you could sit here and lose your shit, or you can have a different perspective and create around this new carpet, because they liked the carpet, it just didn't match the color of the walls. And he said, you can sit here and lose it. And what he did was he gave her a different perspective and gave her an end result. And they now are redesigning the living room, and something that they're really excited about, and even in the face of what we're dealing with. And I told him, I said, that's doing the work, man. I said, you're in service to your family, and took them out of psychological tension and gave them a functional creative tension, and end result to something they can create, as so that they don't, you know, kill each other, because they're all grouped up in this house trying to take care of everybody. And I thought it was brilliant.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. It's really important that we have an end result. You have to understand, he knows that he wants to be in service to his family. He brought his mom up to a higher vibration. And that's what this is really all about. We're not just doing it in the face of coronavirus, we're doing it all the time. all the time. It becomes your full-time responsibility to set the pace. It becomes your full-time responsibility to know what your end results are all the time. You have to know what your end results are all the time. And you bring up an interesting point as well about perception. Let's just talk about this really quickly. I want to wrap this up now, but I do want to make sure we talk about this, which is, the way you perceive things, and arguably, a lot of this conversation is about the way the world is perceiving what's happening to them. The way you perceive things generates a story in you. That story generates an emotion in you. That emotion generates a behavior, and that behavior generates an outcome. So the biggest thing for us as leaders, as pace cars, is we have to know what our outcome is, and then we have to know how we have to perceive the situation in order to get to that outcome. In other words, we have to adjust our thinking, our perception, to be in alignment with our end result. So the goal becomes then looking at all of the fear and saying, okay, that's a component, looking at everything that isn't working, but also looking at everything that is working and saying, okay, but there's this. And the stuff that's working, the stuff that isn't based in fear, is actually truth. So if you're going to build a story, don't build it on fear, build it on truth. Let your truth then set the emotion that generates your behavior, and you will get your outcome. You have to choose to look at this not from the perspective of what isn't working, but from the perspective of what is working and what I want to perpetuate and experience more of. What's my end result? Mihir, do we have anything from the audience? I'm going to have Jess give Jess a chance to talk, but do we have anything
not
from
any
the
new
audience?
questions, just a response to mine. There's a lot of fake news out there, but I'll address that in my closing comments. So.
Okay, cool. Jess, before we move into what we can do next, just any pearls of wisdom around being a pace car and how it serves?
Most of my life, I worked harder to get the right answer so that I could tell people what I thought they wanted to hear in order to maintain a connection with them. And since doing this work and really taking ownership and acknowledging what my truth is and owning it and expressing it, I see over and over and over again so much evidence that when I'm willing to step in and share what my truth is, it connects to other people's truth, because we are all connected. And we connect dysfunctionally and we connect functionally. And I was connecting from a very dysfunctional and unhealthy way and perpetuating someone else's dysfunction and enabling that, and also perpetuating my own. So as soon as I started to really take a risk, and it was so scary to own my truth and to speak my truth in my relationship with my husband, with my clients, with my closest friends, with my family, and each and every time that I do, I experience the discomfort, and I also get to see the miracle that happens, because every time someone eventually will come to me, if not immediately, and thank me for sharing my truth, because it helped them to be able to connect with theirs. And I have so many examples of this, and I'll share another time, but it's just so evident to me and so powerful how much more energy I have living in my truth, how much more I can see things accurately living in my truth, how much more of my truth is being reflected back to me. And yeah, that's the biggest piece for me right now, is just noticing when I am in my truth and speak it, I connect to other people in their truth.
Yeah. Okay, so that's another topic, and folks, just for point of fact, I just want to make sure I get this across to you. We've covered a lot of topics today, and that the conversations moving forward are going to go into more depth about some of these things that we've talked about: being in service, truth, objective truth, perception and how that works, stories and how they work. We're going to go into all of that. Today is an introduction to the deeper conversations we intend to have moving forward. But one of the things we'll be talking about is the idea that separation is an illusion. you know, we are not separate from each other. We live the illusion of separation, but we're connected to each other and to all things through time and space. So there is no separation. And when you go into your higher vibration, you are most likely going to trigger a higher vibration in somebody else around you. Now, the ones that are way down here, that's going to take some work. But the people that are up here or that share your vibration or that are close to it, they're going to jump in. You know, birds of a feather. You get this, you understand this vibrationally. You may not understand it from a vibrational perspective, but you get that like attracts like. And if you are in this vibration, you can rest assured that there will be people that will not only join you in this vibration, but will actually seek to, you know, join you in your efforts to be a pace car and become pace cars themselves. And if we've done what we set out to do today, then some of you will have come up to this vibration with us and will be stepping forward today as pace cars. So why are you here in the first place? Because we put a vibration out there and it resonated with you on some level, and now you're here. Because we're not separate. Because, yeah, there are some people that are harder to reach because they're deeper into their fear, but none of us are separate. All of us understand what I'm saying right now. All of us, everybody in the whole world understands this. Whether they can rise to that vibration or not remains to be seen, but those of us that can, will. And I choose to believe that this will bring the unity that we so desperately need in this world. The next thing I just want to just really quickly, I just want to talk about who we're going to be in the face of it. And that's where we're going to leave it today. So who are we going to be in the face of it? This morning, I heard, I don't watch the news. I try and stay away from it as much as possible. It invades my life anyway. But I heard this morning a story about the disgrace within our own government where some Republican leaders were apprised of the coronavirus and its impact on the world before it hit. And they chose to sell all of their stocks that they had in companies that they knew would be hit by the virus, and then put that money into work at home technologies and other types of technologies that will thrive as people become more isolated and have to work from home. Which is just, you know, by any other name is insider trading, and it's despicable. And it's who these people choose to be in the face of this. This is who they chose to be. They chose that. It was an active, conscious choice. We're going to capitalize on the misfortunes of others. That's who they chose to be. I personally think that's despicable. There's no service in that. The only person they're serving is themselves. But that's not where my focus is. My focus is on a lot of people that you know want to be better than that, want to serve from a much higher vibration. So, you know, who will I be in the face of it? I think you kind of have an idea of who I plan to be in the face of it, and who the people on this panel plan to be in the face of it. But I encourage you now to decide who you're going to be in the face of it. If we go back to some of the shadow, I'd like to just address some of the shadow, and just whether the people are here or not, we can offer some suggestions of where they can go, yeah, as a group. Okay, so Mihir, bring us back. I know that there was Brenton and there was a couple other people. I heard that you read some shadow.
Yeah, let's see, I'll go back to as far as I possibly can. Adeline, you know, oscillating between anger and powerlessness in front of how people are behaving selfishly out there, individuals and governments. We have fear of people not following the guidelines and instructions that have been given by the institutions, our government, on staying indoors, self-isolating. Go ahead. Okay,
let's start there. Brenton had a really juicy one, so I definitely want to go back to that one.
Yeah.
But let's start there. Okay, just as a group, what's obvious to you about the statement? Can you read the statement again? I'm afraid that people won't adhere.
Okay, my only fear is that people don't follow the strict instructions and they will get sick and put more pressure on the NHS. Under pressure, people in need can't be helped in time.
Okay. So I mentioned, conflict and conflict resolution a little bit earlier, and again, something else we'll talk about in future conversations. However, all conflict basically boils down to how the situation makes you feel. Now, the conflict here is that this listener doesn't feel like people will do what they're supposed to do, and it will overwhelm the system. Am I getting that right?
Pretty much, yeah, in a nutshell.
That's how I'm perceiving it.
Yeah.
Okay. So, as I said before, all dysfunction comes out of thoughts and feelings, stories, assumptions, one-way bargains, beliefs, core beliefs. And what's playing out for this person? What core beliefs playing out for this person?
There's a right way.
Right way, for sure. What else?
Trust, not trusting in the public.
Trust.
Yeah.
Yep.
Powerless.
Yep.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So from their shadow, in their shadow, a lot of core beliefs are being triggered here. Now, all three of those could be playing out. One of them's playing out the most, and we don't know this person well enough to be able to structurally tell you which core belief is playing out, but we can almost guarantee that one of those core beliefs is playing out. And it's generating a story. It has generated a story. The core belief, I'm powerless, or people don't do what they're supposed to. They don't do the right thing. They know what the right thing is, and they don't do it.
Yeah, they can't be trusted to do the right
People
thing.
can't be trusted to do the right thing. Thank you, Mihir. That story generates an emotion in them. There's a right way to behave. People aren't doing it. People aren't going to do it. It's going to overwhelm the system. That generates an emotion in them. That story has now created an emotion. Now, let's just put ourselves in that perspective. If you're feeling powerless, say, because you know that people aren't going to do what they need to do in order to keep everybody safe and keep the system working the way it's supposed to work, what behaviors are you likely to start to display? Is Denise still there? Has she told us what she's?
Denise, yeah, no, she's watching, but she hasn't responded yet. So,
okay.
Well,
so fine, we can pretend we're Denise.
Denisa.
Oh, sorry, Denisa.
Yeah.
We can pretend we're Denisa. When I'm feeling powerless, there are certain ways I behave. So how are we, structurally, if we just look at this from a structural perspective, how is Denisa likely to behave from her story that, from the trigger of powerlessness in her story, that people aren't going to do the right thing and it's going to overwhelm the system? What's she likely to do?
Well, I know from my own experience, I would want to talk to other people about that and be validated in my belief that this is going to happen, what's going to happen, and then use my imagination to create worst case scenarios.
Yeah.
And then as a result, drop lower and lower and lower into my lower vibration.
Yeah.
And come from a real self-righteous energy, like, look, this is what we're doing and we need to stop right now, kind of thing.
I see
Spot
anger
on.
too.
Yeah, anger. Yeah, of course. Go ahead, Stanley.
No, I was just going to say, I see anger and anxiety just coming up, and maybe do something like some sort of self-indulgence to try to break the tension around it, from smoking cigarettes, eating.
Yeah.
Coping.
Yep. She's okay.
mechanisms.
So spot on. So she's likely to go into a couple of different coping strategies, including trying to get people to come over to her voice of knowledge, which is enrolling people in her dysfunctional vision of
Break
the
her
NHS crumbling under the weight of people who don't do what they're supposed to do, because it helps to resolve her tension temporarily.
Yep.
And will she find people to have that conversation with?
Mhm.
Of
Yeah.
course she will. Why?
There's a buffet, a
Why?
big buffet of them.
Because there's no separation, and she's at this vibration, and she's going to attract them like a moth to a flame. And she's going to have lots of people who will help her to prove this dysfunctional story to herself. We talked earlier, you're either improving or you're in service. And this is somebody trying to prove their core beliefs. And whenever you're in a core belief, you will be trying to prove it. So the minute you step into something like right way belief or powerlessness, or feelings of not being capable or not being loved, you're in your dysfunction, and you're going to work to prove that your stories are true. So she's going to go out and find all sorts of proof that people aren't doing what they're supposed to do and that the system is going to collapse. And then she's probably, as I think Mihir said, likely to go out and start proselytizing and getting really regimented and militant about this. You know, we want to just wag our finger, and from that energy, you know, we want to resolve our tension by pushing it off on other people. You're not doing, I know the right way to do it, but you're not doing it. So you take this shitty energy, you know, that I just threw at you on Facebook, and now I feel better for 5 minutes. Rather than giving people viable options, you know, instead of saying you're not doing it right, saying, hey, look, here's an example of people that are doing it this way and it's working. That's what we mean when we say setting the pace, not forcing our wisdom down other people's throats, but giving them the choice to come up to the vibration.
So recognizing when we go into that reaction is what I'm hearing you say, recognizing when we go into that reaction and when our temptation to point a finger happens, and to really ask ourselves in that moment that we become aware of it, like, well, who do I want to be in response to this?
Yep.
Who do I want to be in order to, well, you know, create the change I want to see?
Yeah. Yes, exactly. Ultimately, what's my end result? What do I want to accomplish by getting myself involved in this conversation or this situation? I don't know. Is Brenton still with us?
I don't know if he's still with us because that doesn't tell me.
He had originally said that he wanted to lock himself.
Yeah. He
Oh,
wants
yeah.
to withdraw
So
and basically protect himself.
I think his exact words were something along the lines of, I don't give a shit about anybody but myself and my family.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was his original.
Okay. What's playing out there? You know, I don't give a shit about anybody but myself and my family. All I want to do is lock ourselves away and let the world go to hell in a handbasket, basically. What's playing out there?
Powerlessness.
Powerlessness for sure.
Control.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There is a way that it is.
Mm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. There's a way that it is. The world's gone crazy, and that's the way it is. So we're just going to lock
Capacity.
ourselves up, and capacity for sure. Like, I don't know how to handle it, so I'm going to just not handle it. I'm going to just hole up and just hunker down and let the storm pass. You know, not exactly a leadership role. And I accept that is Brenton in his fear that you know that is not maybe an accurate assessment of who he is as a human being and the way he performs in the world. But you know, he's letting us into his shadow, and if he's inclined to operate from his shadow, then what could we expect him to do? What kind of behaviors can we expect him to do?
Act in service to himself and think only about his family and disconnect from the rest of the world and go into
Isolate.
a survival mode.
Yeah.
It's
lower
the survival
vibration.
mode. It's
Yeah.
the energy that's the survival energy that's the problem.
Mhm.
You know,
Us against the world kind of mentality. Victim.
Yeah, exactly.
lack.
Yeah.
exactly. There's nothing
That's-
expansive there.
Exactly. It's really the case of the toilet paper going out. It's that level of
Yeah,
we are-
exactly.
You know,
Right.
that
So
everything's
he's
gonna
not
run
alone
out.
in that, right?
Exactly. Everything's gonna run out. There's not gonna be enough for me and my family,
Mhm.
and you know, we're gonna wither and die, basically.
Right. Now, some of the behaviors could be considered functional, self-isolating, and you know, and just hunkering down and committing to staying within the house, and you know, taking some precautions within the house, limiting guests into the house and things like that. These are all, again, somewhat reasonable precautions if they're coming from the right energy. But dysfunctionally, he's going to be inclined to operate from the lowest rung of the hierarchy of needs.
Mhm.
He's going to be thinking about nothing but his own selfish needs. Therefore, there will be no room to be charitable to anybody else. There will be no room to be in service to anybody else. And the reality is, and you mark my words on this, left unchecked, that will extend to his family eventually as well.
Mhm.
If somebody
If it
is,
becomes the most powerful vibration.
if it becomes the most powerful vibration, then eventually people in the family will be considered dangerous as well. If there's somebody in the family who is most likely a carrier. We get into, say, I think the gestation period is roughly 2 weeks. We say, 5 days to 2 weeks. It's so ambiguous. And but we don't know, I don't think anyway, that we know exactly when people become contagious. So there's all this ambiguity. And if you are hunkered down with a group of people and one person's vibration of fear is festering, it's going to turn into a pressure cooker situation. This is what happens in reality shows, when people, it's the truth, right? When you see people's dysfunctions play out, because they're in these pressure cooker situations and they start to turn on each other. Even alliances that, that should hold, family alliances, might not hold in the face of this if this fear were left unchecked. And so we laugh because to us that seems absurd, but I guarantee you that there are houses, there are homes right now that's playing out in right now. There are people who are operating from a much lower vibration. There are people who are in their drugs and alcohol addictions. There are people who are in their abuse addictions that are playing out this type of dysfunction and turning a jaundiced eye on their own family, a suspicious eye on their own family. And if this thing were to go on for months, like it potentially could, they would start to turn on each other.
Mm-hmm.
Structurally, we can expect that.
Structurally, we can expect that. And that's exactly the danger of running with your emotions from your fear-based, from your shadow. So again, who could Brenton be in the face of it, though? We see who he could be dysfunctionally. Who could he be functionally in the face of it?
He could be a leader. He could be a...
How would he lead?
By example, but actually getting his facts straight on what's, what is actually possible to happen within his own family, what is the susceptibility of falling direly ill and all that kind of stuff, and making a cool, calm, and calculated sort of decision, and actually guiding his family on how to, best navigate this time when there was a lot of bullshit going around and flying around, because we're not just catching the coronavirus, we're actually catching a lot of bullshit too. So
absolutely. I know Brenton, and I know that he lives remotely as well. And actually, there's no reason for any of this other than the fact that there may be people coming into the house that would represent a threat. And I also know that in his dysfunction, he has leaned toward not allowing anybody to come into the house. They're totally isolating, completely isolated. Now, I also know from his functional perspective that that's not really where he wants to be. Where he really wants to be is the person who is not only looking out for his family, but for everybody who comes in contact with his family and for anybody who comes in contact with him. I know that Brenton truly wants to lead, and that he's tempted by his dysfunction to fall into this, into this lower vibrational behavior. But I also know that from his functional higher vibration, with an end result of, finding a way to make this work that works for everyone in the family, that he can come to an agreed upon behavior that will allow him to be more altruistic, less selfish, more generous of spirit, and less protective. There's a difference between protecting your family and and being completely paranoid about the threats. I mean, here I think you put it well when you said getting an accurate view of his current reality by getting aware of what the truth is, and then making a decision from there. Not a truth on like what everybody says, but the truth on what's going on in your particular community. How far has it spread in your community? And what kind of precautions can you take now to make sure that 3 weeks from now you're not infected, without getting hysterical about it, without letting the fear dictate your behavior. There's more functional behaviors, and one of them is expressing that fear to your family so that they can help you out of it.
Mm-hmm.
Because sometimes you can't always be a pace car. Sometimes your fear gets the better of you.
Yeah, you
and
can't
you
do it
need
alone.
somebody else. Say it again, Mahir. Sorry.
No, you can't always do it alone. You kind of need to. You have to lean on your family members.
Mhm.
Yeah, exactly. And and so the idea is to have those conversations and be more honest and say, this is where I'm tempted to go in my fear. But that's not who I want to be. So help me get to someplace better. Because sometimes you just have to admit that your fear has got the better of you.
It happens
It's a
to all of us.
Yeah, exactly. But it's a temporary situation. We all come in and out of consciousness. And the goal here is to, stay conscious as much as possible, but also to be willing to let somebody remind you that your vibration has dipped. We want to take this conversation up to the next level and start getting really specific about how we actually become pace cars, the things that will get in our way, and the things that we can do to ensure our success as a pace car. But I encourage you to start thinking now, even if you don't come back to the conversation, start thinking now about what you're experiencing, who you want to be in the face of it, and what's obvious for you from a perspective of what's working in your life and what you would like to expand on. Who do you want to be in the face of this virus, and what's obvious for you as a result? So when I say, what am I experiencing? Remember, not just your fear, but also everything that's working. Who do I want to be in the face of it? That's your end result. What do I want to accomplish? Who do I intend to be? How do I intend to show up? And then what's obvious? What do I have to do in order to show up that way? So that's where we're going to leave the conversation for today. Thanks for everybody who joined us. I want to thank Mahir Patel, Jessica Ruga, and Stanley Fisher, who is posing as me here today. But yeah, I just want to thank everybody for showing up today, and for the listeners at home for, for at least being curious about another way to approach this whole Corona pandemic. And I hope that you'll join us next Friday at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time when we approach, the conversation again from another perspective. Anybody else want anything they want to add before we say goodbye?
Yeah, I'll say it quickly. Look, for all the people that's receiving all kinds of messages about what's going on, speaking your truth is not about giving your opinion. And the best way to discern whether you're speaking your truth or not is something that I want to quote from Rumi. Is it true? First of all, ask yourself what you're going to say or what you're receiving is true. Then ask yourself whether it's necessary, whether you need to know it or not, whether it's worth talking about. And eventually, right now, we need a lot of kindness. So is it kind, right? Is what we're sharing, there's a lot of fear, there's a lot of bullshit, but can we share that stuff that's kind? Can we actually speak our truth in a way that is kind, that serves those around us? So that's the note I'm going to end on.
I like that. And, mine was, each choice I make, I'm either contributing to the fear and the panic, or I'm contributing to supporting people out of it.
Excellent. Thanks, Jess. Stan.
You pretty much said everything that I was going to say. Is just continuing to be a leader in my community at work, and to be lovingly patient, and to create an environment that's conducive to a very well-being of happiness and support.
Yep. I'll leave you with this. Folks, do the best you can to be patient, and to be understanding, because yes, people are in their shit, and they're most likely going to get even deeper into their shit.
Yep.
And even though you might have the consciousness to be able to see that doesn't serve them or anybody around them, be patient. Part of being a pace car is not coming down to somebody's vibration, but meeting them at where they are, and being able, which means understanding that that's where they're coming from, not buying into it, not empathizing with it, but understanding that vibration and saying, hey, you know what? Maybe I could do something to raise that a little bit, rather than getting frustrated, pissed off, or shunning somebody because they're just obviously in their shit. Part of what we're doing is generosity of spirit. And that means that we have to be kind and gracious and compassionate, because some people just won't be able to lift themselves up by themselves. And that's ultimately, if you're joining us on this quest, that's ultimately what we're asking you to do. Help those people especially raise their vibration. So thanks for being here. It's been a
Thank you,
real
guys.
honor to serve you guys, and hopefully we'll see you next week.
Next week. All right. Thank you guys for tuning in.
Bye. Thank you.